Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the stream. I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Welcome to those that are here. I appreciate you guys so much for joining me and hanging out with me again. It's awesome to hear from you guys. Hello, Mahan. Hello, AJ, the first two of the crowd to join. Appreciate you guys for being here again. It's awesome. You guys are here. How's your guys' Mahan? How's class? How about you, AJ? I can't remember. Are you in class still, or are you graduated? Are you in your master's, AJ? Welcome in, you guys. We are going to be working on our Harvard CS50X final project, the Small Business Manager. We're going to be specifically researching into Tkinter today again. We're going to be taking another look into Tkinter resources and learning material. More specifically, we're going to be looking at Corey Schaefer's videos for Tkinter. I really like Corey Schaefer. I've been watching his Python videos from the very beginning since I started. I haven't really shouted him out too much on the channel actually. He just does a really good job of just in very simple, very fluid terms explaining things, giving quick 20-minute tutorials on various subject matters within Python packages and whatnot. And he's very good at just giving you the actual information you need to know and no like FUD, no nonsense, and just getting straight to the point. And it's I don't know, the way that he's able to convey his topics too is just very, I don't know, it really sticks with you. It really, I don't know. I really enjoy his videos, so highly recommend you check out Corey Schaefer's videos. But we're going to be watching and taking a look at his Tkinter tutorial that he released just under a year, 7 months ago to the day. Not to the day, but just 7 months ago. What? We're gonna be getting into Tkinter here. We did do a little trial run on Tkinter for our small business manager a few weeks or months back. Um, don't really remember too much other than just the basic setting up of a Tkinter loop with TK as class and whatnot. So this is gonna be a great opportunity if you guys are also wanting to get some experience with Tkinter to watch alongside me here. Let's go ahead and dive in and watch this together. I'm not gonna make it as formal as the CS50 ones. We're just gonna talk and pause. This might be. Have you guys seen? I think that what's his name? The Prime again? Is it Prime again or Primogen? I can't. I don't know his name pronunciation. I've seen a couple of his clips and he's often known for like just rambling on about stuff for like making a 20-minute video into like an hour and a half or something. It's like the joke or whatever. AJ says, I'm still in class. I have another year until graduation. Yeah. How's your classes going? Carlos, welcome back. What chapter are you on? You get past chapter 11 of PCC? Tim, you're too kind. Tim, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining me again. You're awesome for being here. Tim, you're an intern, right? If I'm correct, aren't you working an internship? Or are you a working professional? Add a day counter. That's a good idea. Let's do that. Day 2. Day 2. Like that. Day 2. Or should we just do number 2? All right. That's fine. All right. If you guys are here, leave a like if you're one of the early crew. We got a few people in here. We got almost like 10 or so people in here, in and out. So if you guys are part of the new, or not new crew, but early crew, the regular usuals, leave your thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for being here and joining me again. I got to make some sort of like, ticketing system to where you can like, I think it would be a cool project. Mahan and I have talked about it over and over again, where like if we could set up some sort of like maybe I could drop a link in chat or something and you guys could pull a ticket if you guys were here for that day and then you could collect tickets based. Oh, that'd be a good idea. Okay, so what if like kind of like around a raffle, but just like an attendance thing or something like a project. You just drop a link, and then who you can go to that link and just pull a ticket basically for from that link, like a ticket that you were there on that day, and then collect basically your admit tickets, and then you can raffle them off or like do basically like, it'd be like a cool streamer viewership thing. I think that'd be a cool project. Okay. um. Hey, Wing Hong, welcome back in, dude. How's it going? Finally got past chapter 11 on to 12 now. Yes, yes, yes. 12. What chapter is number 12, Carlos? During the summers, I work as a data science internship. I'm a senior majoring in data science, pursuing a master's starting in the fall, dude. Nice, Tim. Looking for a referral. You're funny, Tim. You're funny, Tim. Um, that's funny. That's awesome, Tim. Going for the masters then. What makes you want to go for the masters? Good old days we used to talk about yeah, we used to talk about projects, Mahan. We can start our own software firm from from this channel. That'd be cool. I mean, what if we got good enough that we could put together a team of freelance software engineers like the Avengers for software? That'd be we could wear tights. All right, let's go ahead and dive on in. I'm not gonna make it super formal, and I'm gonna still chat with you guys and pause in and out. So let's go ahead and watch this tutorial on Tkinter. I'm gonna go ahead and also I'm going to take some notes. Um, so let's go ahead and open up just like a repo for general notes or something. Uh, General notes. Let's go to make a new folder called Corey Schaefer videos. Corey Schaefer YouTube. And then we'll go ahead and code out this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a new folder for Corey's. We're going to take notes here. We're going to give Corey the respect he deserves. Let's go ahead and make this Python TK enter tutorial. Or hold on, let me read it. Let me make these hyphens rather than underscores. I like hyphens in file names. I don't know because I don't have to press shift. And then let's just make a new markdown here called part1.notes. Part1 notes.md. Okay, here we go, boys. Let's get this show on the road. Python tutorial part 1. Getting started. Elements. Layouts. And events. So my goal here is I really want to get good with Tkinter specifically because I think it could be a quick, application for us to be able to use in a lot of our current projects to just quickly throw together some UI and test things out. And yeah, if we want to make things more elaborate and crazy and more web oriented, we can do Java. We can learn JavaScript, more into JavaScript, more into React, and all that kind of jazz. But in terms of Python, sticking with the core roots of this channel, I think it's important for us to really grasp an understanding of a simple GUI package, a library like Tkinter, and really gain a solid, understanding of it so we can quickly, in our own packages, like I said, throw together a UI that can be applicable and really start to expand our projects into the realm of, more world-friendly kind of things. All right. Oh, Carlos. All right, he's finished part one. Then he's on to the project section of the book. I'm not sure if Tkinter is the best UI library, and I don't know about the delay either. It's kind of is what it is. Right. Let's go ahead and get started here.
Hey there, how's it going, everybody? In this video, we're going to be learning how to create graphical user interfaces in Python using tkinter. And tkinter is a popular package used for creating GUIs in Python, and it's actually part of the standard library, so there shouldn't be anything additional that we need to install in order to start working with this. Now, there are some other popular packages for creating user interfaces in Python, and we'll take a look at some of those in the future and see why we might choose one over the other. But in this video, we're going to be getting started using tkinter to create a basic application. But first, let me show you a quick example of something that we can build using tkinter. So I'm currently working on a personal application here. Let me pull this up. And I built this using tkinter and some databases in the background. And what this is it's something to help me categorize credit card transactions. And this is just the first version of this, so there's a lot of changes that need to be made. But we can see here that it has everything that you'd expect from a typical GUI application. So we have text input fields here, radio buttons, checkboxes, buttons for saving data. We can even switch menus up here that shows me a list view of all of the categories that I currently have saved and things like that. So that's just a quick overview of something that we can build using tkinter. And I'll actually do a separate video on writing those other applications.
We're watching Corey Schaefer right now. He's the beast.
But in this video, I wanted
the
to
audio?
cover
He's a
getting
little
started
loud.
with tkinter.
Turn it
So
down a little
we're just
bit.
going to learn how to create a window, learn about the basics of adding different widgets like buttons, labels, text fields, and other common elements that are used in these types of application. And we'll also learn about the different ways of positioning in order to lay out our widgets within the application exactly how we want. And we'll also learn how to handle events like clicking buttons, pressing on the keyboard, and things like that. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Now, I had mentioned that this is part of the standard library with Python, so there shouldn't be anything that we need to install using pip. But in my case, I'm using Homebrew's version of Python, and it didn't connect everything in the background that needs to be connected. So I actually had to go and install this additional library through Homebrew. Then that is brew install python-tk. So even though it is in the standard library and there's nothing additional to install through pip, on my specific system on Mac through Homebrew, I did have to install this one additional package. But now I'm going to go ahead and close that and bring this up. So now let's jump in and start writing our first GUI application. Now, first, let's run a basic test to make sure that everything is working as it should. So to do this, they have this helper function here to where we can just say import tkinter as tk and then run tk._test. And if we run this, then we can see that we get this pop-up window here, and it gives us the latest version of tkinter, or it tells us what version we're using, and adds a button here that has some functionality to it, and also a button to quit out of this. Now, I'm going to be starting this tutorial with the assumption that what we did there works for you and that we can get started using tkinter.
Okay.
Now, if that test doesn't work for you, then there are several things that could be going wrong in the background that are beyond the scope of this video, so that I'm just not going to dive into here. So again, I'm going to start from the assumption that this script works for you so far up to this point. Okay, so now we're ready to get started by writing a simple application. So to do this, we can initialize our main window, and we will call this root. So I'll say root is...
Okay, so part one, so you need to initialize the main loop. Typically, right, I remember this is typically typical variable root is is a typical var variable used to define the main loop of tkinter, right?
Equal to, and this is just tk dot tk. So if I was to run this now, then we don't get any errors or anything like that down here, but nothing actually popped up. Now, something does actually happen here, but it's just opening and closing the application too quickly for us to notice. So in order for us to keep the window open, we have to start the application's main loop. And this is also what allows us to listen for events like mouse clicks and keyboard presses and things like that.
Okay.
So we can start this loop just by saying root dot main loop. And if we run this, then we can see that now we get this blank window with nothing in it, which is what we should expect since now
what was that?
Start events like mouse clicks and keyboard presses and things like that.
Okay.
So we can start this loop just by saying root dot
By adding the main loop method.
And if we run this, then we can see that now we get this blank window with nothing in it, which is what we should expect.
Oh, let's get rid of this. Good. There we go. Cool. Now we get a blank window, right? Okay, so let's go back here. So I'm going to take what I have here, go over here, and just, I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to put it down here and just put like this, 2, 3, pi, right? Nice. Right, we'll say the dot main loop method will close. What does the main loop method do? Corey's fonts are really tiny. Can I zoom in here? You know, it doesn't. It only zooms in on this. Try to just make it bigger for you guys here. Right. Okay, there you go. How about that? Is that a little bit better? A little better for you guys? Okay, let's keep going here.
We haven't added anything to our application yet. So let's go ahead and do that now and add a simple button. But first, one simple addition that every GUI should probably have is a simple title for the window that pops up. So to set this right under where we're creating our root, we want to do this above where we're starting that main loop. We can just say root.title, and I'll just set this title to simple app. Now if I run this, then we can see here that we have a title of simple app on our window here now, so that's good. So now let's add some widgets, and we'll start with a button. Now since tkinter has evolved over the years, there are a lot of different ways to do things. Now the goal in this video isn't to see how everything has evolved over time, but to use the current best practices to get up and...
Okay, so the title method. Right, so then dot title. Root dot this, root dot title, right, with some string. my gosh. Turning into Mahan, I can't type. Root.title with string method. The title method will change the window name, window header, just title. Okay. Okay, let's keep on rolling.
Running. So you may see other tutorials do something differently than how we're doing it here,
Title
but that's
will
okay.
change the title.
All I can do is show you the most recent way of how I've learned to do things, and if you do see someone doing it differently in the future, then you can investigate that down the road when you come across it. So let's go ahead and create our button. So to add a button here, I'm just going to say button is equal to tk.button. And now we're going to pass in our root. And we're passing in root here because this is going to be the parent window where our widget will be added. And we don't have any others right now. So let's go ahead and pass in root. And we'll see some examples of some different parent windows here in a little bit.
Okay, so this will create a button using TK button class. Creates a button using the TK button class and takes in the root as its argument. What did he say it was called?
.button. And now we're going to pass in our root. And we're passing in root here because this is going to be the parent window where our widget will be added. And we don't have any others right now. So let's go ahead and pass in root. And we'll see some examples of some different parent windows here in a little bit. And now let's go ahead and give our button some text as well. So I'll say text is equal to, and we'll just say button 1. And now that this button is created, we can add it to our window. And we can do that using one of the geometry managers to specify how we want to add it to our window. Now we're mainly going to be using the grid layout in this series of videos since that seems to be the most flexible with most applications. And it's also the layout mentioned in the tkinter documentation as the more modern layout system. So to add this button, we can simply call the grid method on the button. Now, you have to do this in order to get the button to show up in our window. It can be an easy mistake to create a widget like we did here and wonder why it's not showing up, only to later realize that we didn't use one of these geometry.
Okay, so let's go back to our notes here. Let's make a little section here called methods, right? And then I'll throw some various methods in here, like the title method, right? Title. To so we'll remove that there. We'll keep this here to reference this, but then we'll say we'll put in widgets. Right, so widgets, number 1 is going to be the button, right? So it's going to be called the TK dot button on window. Right. Like so. And then we'll say for this guy, we'll say attributes or parameters. optional params. Number one, number one, text equals, right? Button label, the button's label. Text displayed on the button, right? Number two, let's keep going.
Managers to explicitly add it to our window. So to do this, I'm just going to say button.grid, and that will add it to our window. If I save that and run it, then we can see that now we have a very simple application here with a
So text equals here, quote, button one, close quote, and then we go button.grid to basically add it to the grid of its current window. Okay, so I run that. This gets rid of that, and now if I pull in, if I run this here, what? Oh, I already have a text. What? What's going on? What's this error? Keyword text. Oh, there we go. Okay, so if I bring this back, go here. Yeah, we got the button one now. Cool. What an easy to use library. I like it. Yeah, it's pretty simple so far. I like the format so far. It's coming good so far. You know? I wonder what's under the hood to open a new window. Like give me a new if you give me a terminal, I wouldn't know how to open a new blank window. Okay. I've always wondered that too. Depends on the operating system and window management stack. Yeah, I've always wondered that too. Okay, let's keep going.
button that doesn't currently do anything. Now we're using the grid layout here, and as you can probably guess from the name, we can use this to lay out things in a grid with rows and columns. So let's see what this looks like by adding a label before our button. So to do this, I'm going to close down what we have for now. Above our button here, I'm going to create a new label, and this is going to be tk.label, and again, we're going to pass in this root parent here, and then let's go ahead and add some text to this as well. I'll just call this label one. Now again, I'll show you what this looks like if I don't add this using our grid system. Then we can see that we don't have a label here in our application. So you always have to remember, if you want something added, then we can say label one dot grid.
Label.grid. Okay, so there's got to be more to this than just dot grid. Like, how do we start to lay stuff out? Okay, so now we get a label one above our button in the grid. Okay.
Uses that grid.
So let's go over here, take some notes here. Let's do number 2 is going to be label. Right, it's going to go here, tk.label window. Cool. Then we'll same optional parameters as well so far. Cool. Okay, let's keep going.
Layout, and now
so there's a method here called grid that he's using, which so be like widget.grid. I'm not sure, will add the widget to the layout of the widget's parent window. From definition, from its definition. All right.
Now we have a label here above our button 1. So by default, it's stacking these on top of each other into a single column. Now we can specify exactly how we want these to be laid out by setting the rows and columns. So let me close this. And now where we're adding it to our grid here, let's specifically say that we want this to be in row 0, which this is a 0-based index, so that would be the first row.
Okay.
And we'll also set the column to 0, so the first column as well. And now let's also do this with our button. So instead of row 0, column 0, I'm going to make this column 1. So now that should be in the second column. Now if I run this, then we can see that now we only have a single row here, and the label is in the first column and the button is in the second column.
Oh, column. Okay, so you can put stuff in grids, okay.
Now, I know that this beginning stuff can be a bit boring, but we just have to build up this small stuff step by step in order to build our larger applications.
Stay with us
Okay,
here,
so
guys.
now that
Stay
we've
with us
added
here.
a couple of widgets, let's now add in some event handling. So for example, let's say that when our button is clicked, we want it to run a function within Python. So to do this, let's first create a simple function here, and I'll just call this onClick. And it's not going to take any parameters for now, and I'm just going to have it print out testing. And now to add this functionality to our button, we can set the command parameter to this function. So within our button here, when we are creating it, I'm going to set the command equal to this onClick function. Now you want to be sure that you're setting it equal to the function itself and not the executed version of that function. So we do not want the parentheses here. We want to pass this in without running it. So now let's go ahead and...
Okay, command is an optional parameter to the button. Function to be called when button clicked.
Run this, and now if I click on our little button over here, then we can see that down in our Python script that it is printing out testing in our console.
Ooh,
so
let's go. We got it.
Running that function as we'd expect. Now we can also use these functions to change values within the GUI window itself. So instead of printing something out within our Python terminal, what if instead we wanted to change our label when I clicked on the button? So to do this, instead of printing out testing, all I want to do is I want to say label.config, and we want to config the text of that label, and we'll just say something like button clicked. So now if I save this and run it, make this a little larger here, if I click on our button, then we can see that now our label has changed to button clicked instead of label 1, so that worked. Now there's all kinds of different things that we can change with the configuration of different widgets.
So .config so these are methods. config will configure the passed in params, text, etc. of the widget to change on the call of the function, on the call on, we'll configure the passing parameters of the to change when called. Hey Don Soap, welcome back in, dude. How's it going, man? Appreciate you being here. Let's keep trucking here.
If you wanted to see what's available, then you could either look these up online, but for a quick printout, we can simply call the config method within our script and print that out. And this will return a dictionary with keys. So let's go ahead and see what keys are available with this label. So after I create this label down here, I'm just going to print out label.config. And what we want to do here is just grab these keys. So if I save this and I run it, then we can see that we get some dictionary keys back here. So we have active background, active foreground. Where is the text? The text is down here, so that's what we set when we clicked our function. So there's all kinds of things that we can change here. So for any widget, if you want to see the possibilities, then you can just run that there to get a list of all the keys that are available to you. Okay, so now that we have the very basics down, let's make a super simple form where we can have a place to insert text. And we'll have a button that will add that text value to a list. And also a list to hold all those values.
Okay.
So connecting all that together
There we
will
go.
show us a bit more of how
Let's
to
go,
handle
boys.
certain events. So to do this, we'll add a couple of widgets that we haven't seen yet, but the process is...
Yo, there's an earthquake. %, there's an earthquake. You feel that, Sky? My chair started shaking and I wasn't shaking it. Was that an earthquake? Like my blinds are rocking here. You can see them. I think it's still going. My blinds are rocking a little bit. Weird. Whoa, spooky. I think that was an earthquake. Let me see. Oh yeah, my coworker just texted me, who lives near me. Yeah, whoa, that was an earthquake. Oh boy. Hold on, let me text my lady. Four point three. 4.3 earthquake. Oh yeah, right here. It happened right on top of me. Happened like 15 miles away. Woo! I wonder if we're gonna get any aftershocks here. I've only felt like one earthquake before. That was weird. Save the clip, guys. Got the clip. Call me streamer clip right here. Got the clips. Clip farming. Yeah, 4.2 earthquake just happened right now right on top of me. Wow. That was shaking. All right, let's continue on here, you guys. Leave a like for the earthquake. Never a dull moment on this stream. Holy crap. Always something going on. YouTube short's gonna go fire, yeah. Earthquake! Whoa! I gotta give like the Mr. Beast like like Mr. Beast like thumbnail. Alright, let's keep going.
Very similar to what we've already seen. So first, let's go ahead and get rid of everything that we have here so far.
Okay, I'm gonna make a new thing here, so we'll call form.py.
All except for our title, root, and main loop. So first, let's keep everything a bit more organized by using a frame. Now, a frame is basically just a container that allows us to hold different widgets and allows us to more easily organize our layout. Let's create one of these now, and then we'll look at why they're useful in just a bit. So to create one...
Okay, so we're going to have a frame widget. Is that what it was?
Main loop. So first, let's keep everything a bit more organized by using a frame. Now, a frame is basically just a container that allows us to hold different widgets and allows us to more easily organize our layout. Let's create one of these now, and then we'll look at why they're useful in just a bit. So to create one, I'm just going to say frame is equal to tk.frame, and now we're going to pass in this root as the parent window. And now we need to add this to our application as well. So I'll just set this equal to row 0 and column 0 like we saw before. Let me fix this typo here. And again, like I said, a frame is just a container for other widgets. So if I was to run this now, then we're not going to see anything. We're not actually adding anything to our window yet. It's just a container. So now that we have this frame added to our root window, now we're actually going to add our widgets to this frame instead of the root window itself. And like I said before, this will allow us to better organize our widgets in more complicated layouts. And we'll see that in action in just a bit. So now let's create a text entry within our frame. So I'm just going to call this entry, and this is going to be equal to text, or tk.entry, sorry. And now, instead of passing in root as our parent window, we're going to pass in this frame as our parent window.
What is the entry?
The bit. So now let's create a text entry within our frame.
Okay, a text entry. So it's just like an input in HTML. So you have a widget here, number 3 of text and of an entry. Right, text entry should be tk dot entry window, right?
So I'm just going to call this entry, and this is going to be equal to text, or tk dot entry, sorry. And now, instead of passing in root as our parent window, we're going to pass in this frame as our parent window. So now it's going to be included in this frame, and this frame is included in the root application.
Okay, so interesting. Okay, so he created basically a div or a frame within his root. Okay, so So he has his root window, right? And then he had his button and his whatever, right? His button and stuff. But now what he has is and he has his root window, but in 0, 0, he has a frame, right? In that cell, he has a frame in 0, 0, right? This is at 0, 0. Okay. And so in here now, he has an entry. Okay.
And this frame is going to have its own layout. So even though we set this frame equal to row 0 and column 0 within the root, we're going to be starting over at 0 when we add widgets to this frame. And if that doesn't make sense now, then I think it'll make sense in just a second when we see how all this comes together. So now that we've added this entry to our frame, we can specify that within that frame, we want it to be on row 0 and column 0 of that frame. So I'm just going to say entry.grid, and we'll say the same thing here, row 0, column 0. Okay, so now we have a text entry added to our frame. And now let's put a button beside this text area that will add text from that field to a list. So to do this, I'm just going to call this entry button. We'll set this equal to tk.button, and the parent window that we want to use is the frame, and the text I'm just going to put as add. And again, we're going to want to add this using the grid layout. So I'm going to say entry button.grid, row 0, and instead of column 0, I'll put this in column 1. So now we have our text entry and we have our button. Now let's put a list box below these that will hold all of the values that we add. So to do this, I'm just going to say text underscore list is equal to tk dot, and this will be a list box. And again, we're going to want to pass in that frame as our
so
parent.
that's another widget. Number 4, a list box, right, as tk.listbox window. Okay.
Window, and we're not going to add any more arguments there. And for our grid layout on our text list, let's put this on the second row, so that would be row 1 and column 0. So now we've added a couple of things. Let me go ahead and save this. And
okay, so if we run, no, not that, here, this is what we get. We get this frame up here where we have in the top left, right, of our root, our frame is in the top left, and the top left of our frame is our entry. Perfect. And then right to the right of that, in column 1, next to the entry, we have the entry button. And then right below everything on that, in row 0, columns, or row 1, so the next row down, column 0, we have this list box. And it looks like the list box has some padding on it.
on it really quick. And it looks like
hey Nugs, welcome back. Magnate, what's going on again? How's it going?
Last application. Sometimes you'll run into that when
working on learning some Tkinter to create a
run one and then don't
GUI for our small business manager.
Running other ones in the future. So let's make sure that that's closed down. Now I'll rerun it, and we can see here that we have our text entry, our add button, and our text list. So we can see that this isn't the best looking GUI application. It's very basic, and when I resize the window here, it's not responsive when we resize our window. But we'll fix all of that once we get the functionality working.
All
so
right.
What we want to be able to do is type something here into this text entry, click on the add button, and have it add it to this list box. So to do this, I'm going to be sure to close out of our window here. I'm going to add a function at the top of our script here called add to list. So I'll just add that right up here. So we'll call this add to list, and it's not going to take in any arguments. So first, when we click this add button here, when we click this
need
button
to give this
here, what we're going to want to do
command.
is grab the text of this text entry. So to do that, we can say entry.get. And we're going to want to set that equal to a variable so that we have that saved. And now, before we add the text value to the list, let's make sure something was actually typed in. We don't want it to add a bunch of blank lines if someone clicks the button multiple times. So below here, I can simply say if text. And if there was text, then we can add that to the end of our current list. So to do this, we can say text list, and text list is down here. It's what we called our list box.
Can we append
We can
it?
say text list.insert.
Insert.
And now we're going to use a special tkinter constant that represents the end of the current content in a widget, and that is tk.end. And then we can add in that text. So again, basically all we're saying here is when we run this add to list function, we are getting the text that is in that entry. If there is text there and it's not just a blank line, then we can say text.insert, insert at the end of the content of that widget. And what we want to insert is that text. And lastly, in forms like this, usually when they are submitted, then it erases the original input from the field so that the user can continue entering additional values without manually clearing the form themselves. So to do this, we can simply just say entry.delete, and we want to delete this from the beginning all the way to the end. And again, we're going to use this tk.end as that special constant. Okay, so this is all the functionality that we want for when we click our button. But remember, we need to tell our script to run this function when the button is clicked. We saw this earlier, and we can do this just by passing in this function as an argument to the command parameter. So down here where we are creating our button, I'm going to say that the command, I'm going to say that the command is equal to, and we want it to be equal to this add list function. And again, make sure that this function isn't executed. We're just passing in the function name. Okay, so let's see if we have the functionality that we're looking for. I'll save this and run it. And now let's test this out. I'll say this, click add, is add a test. And we can see that each time it added a new element to our list view here, and each time it also cleared out everything that we had in that text input area there. Okay, so now another common thing that we might see in an application like this is keyboard events. So we might want to make it so that the user can simply hit the enter key to add that text to our list instead of needing to manually click that button. So to do this, we can use the bind method on our entry widget, and this will show us something about event handling that we haven't seen yet. So let's go ahead and take a look. So right below where we added our entry to our frame, now I'm going to bind this entry, and I'm going to bind this to a keyboard event. And the first argument that we're going to add here is going to be the type of event that we want to act upon.
So bind is a method. Bind? What does the bind do? I don't know. Let's find out. Widget bind.
So for example, we could be listening for button clicks, a specific key pressed, and things like that. In this case, we want to handle when the return key is pressed, and the syntax for that is simply, within these brackets here, return. And now that we have this return binded to an event, now we need to specify what we want to happen when that event takes place. Now we already have a function that we've written for this, but there is a caveat here. these bound events will automatically pass an event object as an argument to our callback function, but our current function does not take any arguments. So if we just pass that in as is, then we're going to get an error. So let me go ahead and do this really quick. So I'll pass that in, and let me quickly show you what this looks like. If I run this, then we can see everything works so far. But if I add this in and hit enter, then we're going to see here that we have an error because it passed an event argument to our function that does not currently take any arguments. So there are a couple of different ways that we can handle this. First, we could simply change our function to accept an optional event object. To do that, we could just simply say event is equal to none by default, and that would work. Now, another thing that you'll see a lot of people using are lambda functions for these callbacks. A lambda function is an anonymous function that doesn't have a name and is usually used for very short one-line functions. So if I were to use a lambda function, then the syntax for this would be lambda, and then the arguments that it's going to accept. So I'll accept that event. And now what we want to happen when this anonymous function is ran, what we want to happen is we want to call this add to list function. So that's another way you might see people do it, but I think it looks better the other way that we had it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back to the way it was. None. So now if I save this and run it, now in our application here, we should have this keyboard functionality working. So you can see I'm not clicking on the button, so I'm just saying this is a test, a little out of order from how I typed it in, but that's okay.
Not working.
So
entry.bind. Oh. Add to list, and then we'll do entry, none, like so. Now we run entry.get. None type object has no attribute. Oh, event, sorry. Now if I go add in Mr. Magnet, press enter, no, not working, still. Oh, let's see, without it, I just called that. Now let's quit. Call Mr. Magnet again. There we go. Now we got keyboard set up. Nice. It's coming together. It's coming together.
there we go. It says that all that is working. So I'm going to go ahead and close that down. Okay, so now that we've looked at handling different events and how to have different widgets interact with each other, let's now take a look at some ways we can
what you guys working on tonight? Let me know.
Layout and make our applications look a bit better. So first, our application currently doesn't respond in any way when the window is resized, and different elements aren't really lining up with each other within the window. And this is because by default, things that are added only take up the space that they need, and that's it. So let's make this look a little better by having these widgets line up properly and also resize accordingly with our window. So first, if we look at our text entry area here, or sorry, not our text entry, but our text list, we can see that it only takes up one column, which looks a little weird. And that's because we have both the entry and the button widgets in the first row, but only this one widget in the second row. So to make this look better, I'm going to tell this widget that it should expand 2 columns since there's only one element in this second row, and that it should take up both of these columns. So to do that, I'm going to close down our window, and down here where we have are adding this using our grid, I'm just going to say column span is equal to 2. And now if I save this and run it, then it should take up 2 columns, but we can see that it's still a little strange here because now it's taking up 2 columns, but it's centering it within those 2 columns. So in order to get these widgets to take up the available space, we can tell the widget to stick to certain sides of the window. So to do this, I'm going to close that down. Here, I'm going to say sticky, and for sticky, I'm going to pass in EW, and that stands for east and west.
Ew.
So since we wanted this to stick to the sides, the left and the right sides, we're going to use east and west here. So now, if I save this and run it, then we can see that this looks a lot better. It's now taking up all of the width that it needs to take up, but it's still not responsive if we resize our window here. So we can fix that next. So in order to get this to be responsive, we're going to need to configure the rows and columns of our root window and our frame. So to do this, above the frame here, let's go ahead and configure our row columns and our rows. I'm sorry, our root columns and our root rows. So what I'm going to say here is column configure, and this is going to be for the first column, so an index of 0, and I'm going to set an weight equal to 1. And I'm going to do the same thing for the row here as well. So instead of column configure, I'm going to have this be row configure, and I'll have this be the first row, weight equal to 1. So having the first row and column with a weight equal to 1.
So column configure.
This makes it take up all the available space when it's resized. And we'll look at different weights in just a bit. But for now, let's also configure our frame. Now, since our root window is able to expand, we should now tell our frame to stick to all sides of that window when it's expanded. So we're going to use that sticky parameter again, but instead of just horizontal with east and west, we want it to also be vertical with north and south so that it grows on all sides. So frame here, we're going to set the sticky here, and we're going to have this be north, south, east, and west. And now we're just about done here. What we want to do now is we want our frame to be able to expand as well. So we have to configure those rows and columns just like we did with our root window. But remember, our frame has 2 rows of widgets and 2 columns. We don't want all of these to expand evenly. So for example, it would look weird if our button expanded to be really big. So our text entry and our list box are both in that first row. So let's allow those to expand only horizontally. So I'll say frame dot column configure, and I'll set the first column here with a weight equal to 1. So again, our text entry is in that first column, our button is in the second column, and our text list is in that first column. So the first column is going to be able to expand, and the second column is not. So let me go ahead and run this now, and if I resize this, then we can see that this text input here is expanding to take up the additional space. It's not sticking to the sides yet. Our button is not expanding. And our
so we need to go to our entry grid, make this go sticky equals quote east and west. And so now that'll extend out. Why is my
list box here is expanding horizontally for now? So let me close that. So first, let's fix our list box so that it's growing vertically north and south as well. So to do this, I'll say frame, and we will do a row configure, and that text list is in the second row, which is index of 1. And now, instead of just expanding east and west, let's also do north and south here as well. And for our entry here, it was expanding to take up the space, but it wasn't sticking to the sides. So let's also set a sticky here. And we only want this to grow east and west. We don't want it to grow vertically. So now if we run this, then let's take a look at what we did here. So we can see that when we expand now, that our text list is growing north, south, east, and west, and our text input entry here is only growing east and west, and our button is staying
nice.
There to the side.
Look at that.
Everything is growing just as we specified. And
look at that looks, see you later, Tim. Thanks for coming in. I'll see you tomorrow, man.
So now,
have a good night.
Go ahead and close this out. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at one more thing before we finish up. So just to show why using a frame is beneficial, let's say that everything that we have currently is something that we would like replicated in different parts of our application or even in a new project. Since we added this to a frame, it makes it easier to organize and reuse this set of widgets. So for a contrived example, let's just say that we wanted 2 different forms like this in our application that span 2 different columns in the main window. So to do this, let's make a copy and paste what we had before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this frame and all of the widgets that we have included here, and I will paste these down below here. And now this frame, instead of just calling it frame, I'm going to call this frame 2. So I'm going to grab all of these here, and I will rename these to frame 2. And I'm just going to leave these the same. I should probably change those, but really I just want to show the layout and kind of ignore the functionality for now. So now we have this frame 2, and we're creating a new entry and adding that to frame 2, a new button, adding that to frame 2, and a new text list and adding that to frame 2 as well. So now that we've added this second frame, since this frame has its own rows and columns, we don't need to change anything about the layout of the widgets within the frame. If we didn't have this in a frame and we wanted to add more widgets, then we would have to come up here and say, you know, okay, well, this entry is in row 1, column 1, so I want this one to be in row 1, column 2, and we'd have to do all this math that we just don't have to do now that we have this in a separate frame. The only thing that we should need to do is specify where we want this new.
Tips on staying motivated on projects like this. Honestly, jump into the stream with me and do them alongside me, man. It's one of the best tips I can give you is if I'm doing it and putting in the time, you might as well be too. So, you know, what else would you go, you know, if you are free, right? What else would you be doing? You know, playing video games, going out, hanging out with friends, maybe, I don't know, but like really, so like what else would you be doing? So just if I'm doing it, you know, sit alongside me, work on it too, you know, for a little bit.
Frame to be added. So our old frame is up here on row 0, column 0, and our new frame, I'll just have this be in the second column, so index of 1. Now, if I run this how we have it now, then we can see that now we have 2 identical forms, one in the first column, one in the second column. Now, if I resize this, then we can see that these don't take up the same width when we resize. Now, this is because of how we set up the weights earlier. So let's change these to see exactly how these weights work. So let me go back up here to the top where we set the weights on our root window. So the reason our first column expands is because we set the column with a weight of 1. The second column doesn't have a weight by default, so it only takes up the space that it needs and nothing more. But if we wanted this to take up the same space as our other column, then we could set this to 1 also by saying root column configure, and we can set that column with a weight as 1 as well. So now if I save this and run it, then these should take up equal sizes on the left and the right, since both of the
Okay.
columns are weighted the same.
Nice.
So let me close this out. So these weights are proportional to the weights of the other columns. So for example, let's say
Like weight in
that
terms
the
of
column on the
importance,
left
or
is
like.
meant to be more of a sidebar, but we wanted to expand a little bit, but not at the same rate as the column on the right. So for that, I could set the weight of the right column to be, let's set it to 3. And then it would take up 75% of that additional space than the column on the left. So if I run this, then we can see that now the column on the right has a much larger weight. Now you might notice that this doesn't look like it takes up 75% of the window, and that's because it's taking up 75% of the additional space in this example. So their original sizes don't factor into that size, but this is a nice way to get our windows to expand relative to the importance of what we're trying to highlight most within our GUI application. So let me close that down.
You got a team you're repping this year for March Madness, Michael. Should we make a bracket together? Should we do some brackets together? I'm gonna be honest, I have not watched a single game of college basketball all year long. I'm from Oregon though, so I am a Oregon Duck fan, and I graduated from Utah State, so I am an Aggie fan for them as well. So those are my two teams.
Now, another extremely common thing that we might want to do for the layout is adding padding to our elements, and this is super simple. Let's add padding to both of our frames to give it a bit more space between the edges of the main window.
Okay.
So to do this, on frame 1 here, where we're adding it to our grid, I'm simply going to add in a pad X equal to 5, and I'll add a pad Y equal to 5 as well, and we will put this onto our frame 2 also. So let me go ahead and paste that in. And now if I run this, then we can see that we have a little bit of padding here between our main windows. So it kind of gives a little bit of a visual separation. Okay, and really quick, before we finish this tutorial, I want to show you a couple more tricks for helping our applications look better
look at
among
that.
different platforms. So
That's awesome.
one of those tips is to use themed widgets when they're available. These are updated
Themed
widgets that
widgets.
give a more native look across different platforms, but not every widget has a themed version. So for example, in the code that we have here, the only widget that we're using that doesn't have a themed counterpart is the list box widget. But let's use themed widgets on one of our frames to see if we can see a visual difference.
Okay.
So to do this, I'm going to import TTK, which stands for themed tkinter.
Okay.
And this is also built into Python. So here at the top, I'm going to say from tkinter, import TTK. And now let's use this on our first frame where it's applicable. So instead of TK here for our frame, I'm going to say TTK.frame. So hardly any changes are made. All we're doing is using theme tkinter instead of the built-in one. So I'm going to use this for our frame, our entry button as well. And remember, I said that this list box does not have a themed version. So I'm only going to change those 3. So if I save that and run it, you can see that this doesn't look much different.
That's
but
sweet.
these buttons should now look and behave more natively to the environment that we're on. So we can see I'm on a Mac, so we can see that the button here on our left frame is a bit different than the button here on the right. And
I'm from Portland, Oregon, right? So I'm a huge Portland Trailblazer fan, and they were in the running for tanking for Cooper Flag, but they decided to pull their heads out of their butts and actually win some basketball games towards the end of the year. So I don't think we're going to be getting him.
as our text input, it looks a little different as well. I think they might even have different interactions for how they look when you click on them and things like that. We can see that this one, it's a little bit more obvious than what it is over here. So what Theme tkinter is trying to do here is just make this look a bit more native to the Mac that I'm currently running on. So that's just a quick way to make our applications look a bit better across different platforms. Okay, so what we've learned here so far should be enough of the basics to get you up and running with building your own GUI applications, but there's still a lot that we haven't covered. So in future tutorials, we'll take a look at more topics that we haven't touched here. So we'll learn how to create these using classes, how to have multiple windows, adding images, saving and opening
Oh
files,
my
adding
gosh.
animations, showing or removing widgets based on a condition, and things like that. There's a lot more that we can cover.
Holy crap.
And like I mentioned at the
Animations?
beginning of the
What?
video,
Is
I'll
it
also show you
Pixar?
how I built some of my personal GUI apps that I use on a regular basis, like the credit card transaction one that I showed. Also, I built another one for game nights that simulates rolling dice and tracks the rolls. I also have a GUI
Corey's
application
a
that I wrote for my
beast.
father that reads in Excel files and uses Google Maps API to analyze specific coordinates from different columns and then resaves those Excel files with that analyzed data. So things like that are
Whoa.
really good
Corey's
for
awesome.
GUI
See, this is
applications,
why I love
and you can
Corey.
pass those off to people who might not necessarily know how to run Python, but will know how to run your GUI application. So be on the lookout for those videos in the future, but these fundamentals that we learned here should be enough to get you started with your own applications and experimenting with different widgets and layouts in order to solve particular problems that you might have. Also in the future, I would like to take all of the tkinter content and show how we can create these exact same applications using other GUI frameworks like PyQt and Kivy. So be sure you're subscribed to keep up with those future releases. But with that said, I think that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully now you have a pretty good
Let's
idea for
go.
how you can create some simple applications using tkinter and how we can lay out our widgets and get them to interact with one another. But if anyone has any questions about what we covered in this video, then feel free to ask in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer those. And if you enjoy these tutorials and would like to support them, then there are several ways you can do that. The easiest way is
Nice.
root.
Nice, nice, nice. Python simulate March Madness bracket. All right. That was a lot of good information for tkinter. Honestly, that gave us a lot of the vital widgets and stuff that we need for our project here. So, should we try to throw something together? I don't know. Maybe. All right, let's try to throw something together maybe. Okay, let's open up the small business manager. Open up a new folder called GUI. Right? We'll make a new file here called GUI.py, I guess. Is there a better way to structure this, do you guys think? And then let's go from tkinter import tk. No, from import tkinter as tk. Import tkinter as tk. And then from tkinter import tkk. Or ttk, sorry. Cool. So let's basically I hate when mediocre teams just start to decide to win when it doesn't matter. I know, but I think the Portland Trailblazers were a little bit unique in the fact that I really think it was against their best interest to tank this year. And now here's my reasoning why. Okay. Number one, their coach. If their coach decided to tank, Chauncey Billups, if he tanked this year, he already has a pretty bad track record the previous couple years, and his current NBA tenure as a coach is not too high. It's not too great. So if he added a tank year onto that, it would look really, really bad for him. And I think that if he tanked this year and didn't perform next year, he's gone. Okay? So that's my first reasoning. Two, I think that the Portland Trailblazer fan base would have been against tanking. Now, here's what I'm saying. They wouldn't have been against it in the terms of, yes, we would have understood that we would have gotten a good player, but Portland has been losing for so long and underperforming and been pretty upset with management that if they decided to tank even further, a lot of long-term loyal, um, season ticket holder fans are like this year were considering leaving, and cutting ties and not renewing. So I'm pretty sure that the fan base would have taken a hit as well, just because of the lack of competitiveness and willingness to win and wantingness to win, and then. But the Portland Trailblazers need to do three things at the moment. The first two things is they need to trade Jeremy Grant and they need to trade DeAndre Ayton. Those two guys got to go. Jeremy Grant, he's a good ball player. He's just not fit for the Portland Trailblazers. DeAndre Ayton, he's hurt too much. He's a good player, but you got to have some young guy in there that can move and stay up. He's got to go. Number 3, I think Chauncey Billups got to go. Now, people might disagree with me on this, but I'm not a big fan of Chauncey Billups. I think that his play style is pretty poor. I think that his, actual coaching abilities in the NBA and what he actually has levels up to with compared to other coaches is pretty poor. Um, I really don't see the hype. And I think after this year, I'll give him one more shot at it, but he's got to go after this year if we're not a 500 team, for sure. For sure. And then number 4. Actually, this has to happen. Jody Allen has got to sell the Portland Trailblazers. There's no other ifs, ands, or buts about it. That girl does not know basketball. She just lets executives make the choices herself. She's not actually involved or passionate about it. The Portland Trailblazer franchise is dead in terms of a beating heart from Paul Allen. Jody Allen, his sister, has got to sell the team. Sell it to Phil Knight, please. That's the end of my spiel. Or sell it to Mark Cuban. I'm sure he'll probably buy it now that he's out of the race of Dallas. Someone will. Not Jody Allen. What do you think about that, Magnus? Sorry, that's the Portland Trailblazers rant for you. Okay, so we are building the small business manager. Now, this is going to be quite the experience because we're going to have to try to learn Tkinter here from scratch. We got to start somewhere. We got to implement a GUI at some point. Today is our time. This project is now. So we're going to import Tkinter as TK and Tkinter import TTK. Let's go ahead and do root equals tk.tk. And then we're going to do root.window, dot main loop. And then if we run that, we should get a main loop. Here we go. Now we have a window. Nice. A lot of people are really betting on this Denny guy as well. I saw him play a couple times in person when I went back home. He did pretty well. He puts up some good numbers, but I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if he's a superstar or not, like people are suggesting. All right. So now we have our main loop. So let's go ahead and make a frame within our main loop. And this frame is going to Well, how do we want to organize this? We obviously want tabs, I think, right? We want tabs. We want tabs, but let's just make a simple frame just for adding it. Let's get some practice here. Okay? So we'll say the add item menu is equal to a frame tk tk.frame, right, on the root, add item menu. ttk.frame on the root. Okay, let's go bring, I'm going to pull up my notes off to the side here. Right? So ttk.root. So let's go back to our thing here. Let's give our root a title of small business manager, right? If we run that, cool. This is what we get now, small business manager. Okay. Now we can add our frame. So add item menu. So hold on, let's do this. Let's make an items menu, inventory menu. So how should we do this? I think it'd be better to organize it here. So let's say we have a root menu. So this is our root. Okay. I want to have, obviously we're going to have some tabs up top, right? We're going to have inventory tab, tab, right? So it'll be inventory. This will be expenses, or this will be, so you'll have inventory, you'll have transactions, and then you'll have like your balance sheet or something, right? Or your income statement. Okay. So we're going to be focusing on the inventory section so far. Okay. So the inventory section, we want I'm thinking on the top left is where we will house a larger frame for the user to be able to, scroll through inventory items. So this is going to be inventory here. Right? And then here is going to be the ability frame to add an item. Okay, right? With some various widgets in here, yada, 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 yada. And then we should do like a search, like a item search bar here, right? So down here is going to be a frame for kind of like a item search, right? Something like this. What do you guys think? So let's look up, let me go to the Tkinter docs. Um, basic widgets, more widgets, frame widgets. Requested size, borders, changing styles, label. Okay, so basic widgets. This chapter introduces the basic TK widgets that you'll find in just about any user interfaces: frames, labels, buttons, check buttons, radio buttons, entries, and combo boxes. By the end, you'll know how to use all the widgets you'll ever need for a typical fill in the form type of user interface. You'll find it easier to read this chapter and the following that'll discuss more widgets in order because there's so much more commonality. Each widget is introduced. We'll refer to the widget roundup page. Okay, frame. A frame is a widget that displays a simple rectangle. Frames help to organize your user interface, often both visually and at the coding level. Frames often act as master widgets for a geometry manager like Grid, which manages the slave widgets contained within the frame. So this is the frame on the parent. Frames can take several different configuration options, how they altered or displayed. Requested size. Typically, the size of a frame is determined by the size and layout of any widgets within it. In turn, this is controlled by the geometry manager that manages the contents of the frame itself. If for some reason you want an empty frame that does not contain other widgets, you can instead explicitly set its size to width and or height configuration options. Padding. The padding configuration option is used to request padding frame index padding. Okay. The padding configuration option is used to request extra space around the inside of the widget. If you're putting other widgets inside the frame, there will be a margin all the way around. You can specify the same padding for all sides. Okay, so I did pad X, pad Y on here. Fun fact, you're almost doing something called a wireframe used in software design. What do you mean? What is that? You want to shoot me some more details, Don Soap? I don't, are these docs really the right docs? Hold on. Widget. TTK widgets. TTK comes with 18 widgets, 12 of which already exist in Tkinter. The other 6 are new. All of them are subclasses of widget. Using TTK widgets gives the application improved look and feel. As discussed above, there are differences in how the styling is coded. Style equals black and white T label. I guess we'll go back to the other one. Okay. Changing styles. Style danger T frame. What? A label. What is this? Oh, these are some docs. Oh, the drawing. Gotcha. Right, because in the inventory, you have add items, add item, an item search, and then a yeah, I guess that's fine. So let's look up here, displaying text, menu, fonts, colors, the geometry manager, layout, buttons. The button, unlike a frame or label, is very much there to interact with. Users press a button to perform an action. Like labels, they can display text or images, but accept optional parameters to change their behavior. Jeez Louise, why was this caught under there? Hopefully that didn't rip. Hopefully that didn't rip. Jeez. Okay, so button, the command call, check button. Radio button. Entries. Entry contents, changing, watching for changes, passwords, widget states, validation, combo box. It's a widget that combines an entry with a list of choices. Okay. Okay, so what about, I'm trying not to go to the AI too fast here, but I'm trying to figure out for tree view. A tree view widget displays a hierarchy of items and allows users to browse through it. One or more attributes of each item can be displayed as columns to the right of the tree. It can be used to build it similar to a tree display you find in file managers like the Mac. Okay. Like file browsers. Menus. Menu bars. In this section, we'll look at menu bars, how to create them, and what goes into them. Properly designing a menu bar and its set of menus is beyond the scope of this tutorial. However, if you're creating an application for someone other than yourself, here's a bit of advice. First, if you find yourself with any menus, very long menus, deeply nested menus, you may need to rethink how your user interface is organized. Second, many people use the menus to explore what the program can do, particularly what they're learning, first learning, so you try to ensure that major features are accessible through the menu. So is it a menu bar then? Command, submenus, check, radio button, state. More widgets. List box, selecting items. Oh boy. That are scrollable. Yeah. Huh. Okay, let's look up tab bars, tab sections into Kinter. Creating tab widgets here. So Python offers a range So, okay, so it's a notebook. ttk.notebook. Okay, so let's do this. So let's go bring back these docs here. Right, so it's tab control. So we'll say tab control is equal to ttk.notebook on root. Okay, and then we have to put in tab control dot grid like so. Okay, so now you have that there. So that's notebook. Masters, the parent window options. The options accepted by the notebook method are height, padding, and width. Okay, so then you create, this is the inventory tab. So you go inventory tab is equal to ttk.frame on tab control, right? Oop. Like so. Now if I run that, go here. Okay, so we don't have that in there yet. Inventory tab dot grid. Okay, so it's not in there yet. Okay, so the frame options are class, cursor, padding, relief, style, take focus, height, and width. The frame widget acts as like a container and is used to group other widgets together. Here, the frame widget is used to group the tab widgets together. Okay, then you need to add the tab control. So you go tab control dot add tab 1 or inventory tab text equals quote tab or inventory tab inventory, right? I'll go here, boom, there we go. Now we have an inventory tab. Okay, add child and then options. Method are sticky, state, padding, text, image, compound, underline. The add method is present in tk.ttk notebook class and is used to add new tabs to the notebook widget. Packing the tab control to make the tabs visible. Tab control dot pack, expand one, fill both. So I had to tab control pack, expand one, fill, quote, both. Like that. Okay, so now it's filling up everything. Okay. Because we're packing the tab control on there, which is fine, right? So then let's make this is add inventory. tab 2 notebook. Right. It's filling. Pause. My bad. Forgot the pause there. All right. So now expand. The expand option ensures that equal distribution of space between widgets that have non-zero expand. The fill option ensures that the widget occupies the space allocated to it. Now fill equals both. It specifies that the widget occupies the space along with both x and y values. Pack method is used to organize widgets in blocks before placing them into the parent widget. This can be done using various options like fill, expand, and side. Okay. So this is the inventory tab. We want to create an income statement. A transactions and expenses tab, right? So we're going to have an expenses tab. So this would be expenses tab is equal to ttk.frame on tab control, and then tab control dot add expense tab, and then the text for this tab is going to be equal to expenses. Right. So if I run that, now we have two tabs, inventory and expenses. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a third tab for, right, the income statement. Or the transactions tab. So should I have, so what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to put the transactions tab down here. And I'm going to have the transactions tab actually track both inventory transactions and expense transactions. So if you add an inventory item, you get a line item on transactions. If you sell, you get a transaction. If you put for sale, you get a transaction. If you create an expense, it's a transaction. So, okay, transactions tab is equal to ttk.frame tab control. Then tab control dot add the transactions tab. Text is going to equal quote transactions. Okay, so if we run here, boom. Okay, now we have 3. Okay, almost there. Okay, so now we have that. Let's go ahead. I'm going to copy this down twice for 2 more tabs. Or actually, we don't need the transactions tab because we'll have an individual expenses tracking. So yeah, the transactions will be just for like sale transactions, right? So then this will be the income statement. Income statement. I can't use both. Right? On tab control, do the income statement here. In statement tab. Right? And then tab number 5, lastly, is the balance sheet, right? For double entry accounting. Balance sheet tab. The balance sheet. Right? So now if we run that, cool. Nice. So now we have all 5 tabs up there. Let's go. Clicking now, boys. All right, inventory, expenses, transactions, income statement, balance sheet. Cool. Nice. Now can I give, let's look up TTK notebook styles. Okay, I like that guy. TTK bootstrap. Style.configuration custom T notebook. Tab position southwest. A TTK notebook widget manages a collection of windows, includes a T notebook style. How to use. Create a notebook. Frame. Add a thing. If using classes, states, and options for configuring or modeling, see Python style for information creating a style. Create a new theme. Class names tnotebook, tnotebook.tab. So we'll go into the T notebook, the notebook. We'll give a style equals to quote T notebook, like so. I think you should already apply your OOP to structure your kinter. What do you mean? We haven't learned about that yet. I think that's coming up in the next Corey Schaefer video. So I'm just getting a little bit of practice here before we continue on. So let's just say, how do you set the theme or the style of a notebook in TTK as T notebook? To style widget, you need to use TTK style class to configure the T notebook and T notebook tag elements. Style equals TTK style. Style equals TTK.style. Style. check, expand true, fill both. Style like configure T notebook, background light gray border, 0. So here's our notebook creation here, and here's where we packed. So we need to basically make a style equals to a style class, TTK dot style class, style dot configure quote T notebook background Not sure how to style. Yeah, I know object-oriented programming, but what do you mean with tkinter? Okay. Background color. Um, the notebook widget allows you to select pages of contents by clicking on tabs. When you click on these tabs, the notebook widget will display a child pane associated with the selected tab. Typically, a child pane is a frame widget. To create a notebook widget, use TTK notebook class. In this syntax, master is a parent, and this allows you to specify keyboard arguments to control the appearance of the notebook widget. The notebook widget has some useful options. For example, use height and width to specify the allocated space for the widget. Also, you can add some space around the outside of the widget by using the padding option. The ttk.notebook class provides you many handy methods that allow you to manage tabs effectively. The following describe the most commonly used. The add method allows you to add a child widget to the window. Image to be displayed on the tab. If you use both text and image options, you need to compound option. The compound option describes the position of the image relative to the text. The underline option that takes 0 or a positive integer. It specifies the character at a position of the text on the tab to be underlined. Tab tabled hide table. The hide method temporarily removes the tab identified by the tab ID in the notebook. Forget child permanently removes specified child. So to create a notebook widget, use parent is in the root window. Expand is true. To create some frames and pack them. Parent is in the notebook. So I added the inventory tab to tab control. Add these to the notebook. What is the pack then? It's parents the notebook. Use it to create a class in notebook. Okay. Um, okay, so let's do widget styles. How to use overview. Configure button. Style map. The map function, query or set dynamic values for specific options in style. Each keyword argument, each key in keyword KW is an option, and each value should be a list or a tuple. Holy crap! This is getting okay. So what we got so far? These are our tabs: inventory, expenses, transactions, income statement, and balance sheet. Right. So let's focus on the inventory tab, I guess. Right. Let's bring all this down. So in the inventory tab, we want to have a TTK widgets. Here we go. Here's the notebook. Class ttk.notebook. Add, forget, hide, identify, index, insert, select, tabs, enable progress bar. Just have a line operation. No. Tree view. No item options. Ugh, the UI is tough. It's difficult. Okay, so grid. Tab control.pack. Oh, okay. They just put a label inside for that label. The ttk.label. Okay, so how do we actually... Should we just keep watching Corey Schaefer?
Hey there, how's it going, everybody? In this video, we're going to be learning how to use tkinter with classes. Now, if you're following along with some other tutorials from other sources, this may be one of those things that they don't cover until later on.
Let me grab a refill on my drink. Be right back, guys. Have any of you guys used tkinter before? Is everybody getting their first exposure here with me? You guys are here, leave a thumbs up. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
But in my opinion, this is something that you should be doing almost immediately with tkinter because it's going to save us a lot of headaches down the road. Even when building small, simple applications, I think it's important to get into the habit of using classes, and we're going to see why in this video.
Okay, here we go.
It's not only going to help us
here we go, Don.
with easier layouts and organization, but it's also going to prevent a lot of headaches and ugly workarounds that you'll find yourself using if you're not using classes. Now, we're not going to go into anything super advanced here, but if you're completely new to classes and have never used them before, then I would recommend watching my series on how classes work in Python, and that should give you a better idea of the basics that we might not touch on in this video. Like I said, we're not going to go into anything super advanced, but I will be going into this tutorial with the assumption that you know how to create, very simple applications, how they're initialized and things like that.
Okay.
But if you don't know those things, then I'll leave a link for my series on object-oriented programming in Python in the description section below.
Okay.
But with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So I already have an example of a problem that we can run into when not using classes pulled up here in my editor. Right now, we have a very simple application that we've created with tkinter, and this is the same code and application that we ended up with in our introduction video. Now, if you missed that video, then I'll have a link to this code in the description as well. But basically what we have here is an application where we just have 2 frames. So right here, we have 1 frame, and right here, we have our 2nd frame. Now, by using those frames, it allowed us to organize our code a little bit better. But there should be a problem here that's kind of popping out to you that is pretty common, and it can make code unmanageable pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we created our 2nd frame, we reused a lot of the same code from above.
Yes.
So you can see that this frame 2 here, basically we just added a 2, added this to the 2nd column,
yeah.
And all of that code is basically the same as all of this code, but we're just creating a 2nd frame and only changed a few things. So anytime that you're repeating yourself in programming, it's usually a sign that there's a better way to do things. But the repetition isn't the only issue that we have here. So let me run this and we'll see.
There you go, Don. So
mean.
exactly like you're saying.
So we can see here that we have a simple application that has 2 input forms. Let me make this a little bit larger here. And these are side by side. Now on the left, we're using themed tkinter frame, and on the right, we have a regular tkinter frame. And using frames allowed us to simplify our layout and easily add this 2nd input form on the right side by just copying and pasted the code that we had from the 1st frame. But there is an issue with the code that wasn't addressed, and some of you noticed this and left a comment about it. Now, I actually introduced this bug on purpose into our application because I wanted to show how if we used classes, then we would never run into this problem to begin with.
Okay.
So what's the bug that I'm talking about?
What's the bug?
So let me go ahead and try to add in some information here. If I try to insert anything into this left form, it doesn't work. If I do it in the right form, then the button seems to work and my enter input seems to work. But it seems that this left form is broken. So let me close this down and go back to the code to see why this is. So if we look below our 1st frame here, then we can see that we have this entry binded to our return key here, and it's bound to this add to list function. So now if I look at my 2nd frame here, then we can see that we created another widget called entry, and that we've added that to our 2nd frame. And we're also binding that to an event so that when we hit the return key, it runs that add to list function as well. Now, you might be thinking that the bug simply comes from using the same variable name for both of these widgets, and that's part of it, but changing that alone won't solve our problem. Let's go up to the add to list function and see what this looks like. So here we have our add to list function.
Yeah.
So there's another issue within this function that should kind of jump out to us here as being what's known as a code smell. And that's that we're accessing variables from our global namespace within this function. So for example, we are accessing the entry and text list objects here. And it's not immediately clear just from looking at this function where these are actually coming from. So that's one issue. And we can see that within this function, we're specifically getting the text from that entry widget and then adding that text to our text list. So the fact that we did use the same variable name for that widget is part of the problem because now this entry widget is specifically referencing the entry widget on that second frame and not the first frame since we recreated that.
Yeah.
But that's not the entire problem. Even if we were to rename this to entry 2, so if I were to do that, let me go ahead and grab all of these, rename this to entry 2, let me take that out there, then now we just have that same problem in reverse. Now that add to list function is going to be referencing that entry widget from our first frame, but not our second frame. So what we need here is for our function to reference the entry widget and the text list of the specific frame that's calling that function. Now, there are ways that we could get this to work without classes, but those would take some workarounds with using lambdas or wrapping functions within functions and stuff like that that can get kind of confusing pretty quickly, especially to maintain. Not to mention that we already have repetition and global variable access in our code that I mentioned before. So with all that added up, the better way to do this would just to be to use classes. So let's convert what we have here now to classes, and we'll see how much this cleans everything up. So first, let's go ahead and do the bare minimum and simply create a class that creates the most basic application. There are a few different ways that we can do this, but I'm going to comment out almost everything that we have so far. So all the way up to here, I'm going to comment out. And now the way that we can create an application that's basically empty is from these lines here. So first, let me show this to you without doing this with a class. So I'll say root equals tk.tk, give it a title, and then we want to do a root.main loop and run that loop. So if we remember, that's a very simple empty window. So if I run that, we can see we get an empty window. And now let's create the simplest version of a TK application using classes. So I'm going to show a few different ways that we can use classes, and then I'll tell you my preferred way. One way that we can create a class is to create one that does not use inheritance. So that would look something like this. I can just say class application, and then within here we need our init function. So I will go ahead and create that. Whoops, and I thought I had my tab completion off here. I don't want it adding in a bunch of stuff that's going to confuse us here. I just want to focus on what we currently have. So now within our init function, we need to initialize this. So I can just say self.root is equal to the same thing that we did here. And actually, I can just take...
Okay, so let's try this. Let's say class small business manager. We're going to initialize this and put in a parameter of self, and then just call self.root is equal to tk.tk. Right, so that'll take care of that altogether. Then you can probably give self.root.title is going to be here, right? So I'm going to call small business manager, and then that should, and then I'm going to put this on small business manager, and that should still work appropriately. Ooh.
everything that we have here, put it inside of our init function, and all I would need to do is put self in front of this, and that should be enough to give us
main
our very basic app using classes. So if I say app is equal to application and create an instance of that, if I run this, then we can see that we still get that blank window there, but instead of creating it outside of the class, we just created everything here inside the class and then created an instance of that class. So the approach that we're using here creates this tkinter instance within our application class itself. And we can see that that worked, but if we wanted, we could also create the tk instance and run the main loop outside of the class. So to do this, we need to pass in the instance of tk as an argument to our class. And we can do that by adding it as an argument here. And since we want to create the tk instance and main loop outside of the class, all we need to do within the class is change things like the title. So I'll just set self.root is equal to that instance that we're going to pass in there. And then we can just set the title. And now outside of here, I can say root is equal to tk.tk. And then we can pass this in to our application class, and it passes that into the init method there. Sets
tk.tk on root.
that sets the title, and then with from outside the class, we can run our main loop like that. Now if I save that and run it, then we can see that that works as well. So now I'll close that down. So with those first two ways of creating classes like we did, one where we created the instance inside and one where we created it outside, we can sort of think about this in the sense of saying that our application class here has a tkinter instance. It's not a tkinter instance itself. If we wanted to make it a tkinter instance itself, then we can inherit directly from tk.tk. And this is my preferred method because I feel like it makes more sense and helps organize the code better. So to inherit from tk, we can simply add that to our class definition. So I'm going to take this here without the parentheses there because we don't want to create an instance. And I think I messed that up while I was moving things around. This needs to be tk.tk. And now we no longer need to accept this instance as an argument. So I will remove that. And another thing that we need to do, I'll go ahead and remove this as well. Now another thing that we need to do here is to run its constructor. And to run its constructor, we can say super dot and run that super's init function. And that's basically the same as what we did down here with running tk.tk. So it's just initializing that parent class and then allowing us to make our own customizations after that. So now, instead of us thinking about this as our application having a tkinter instance, now we can think of this in the sense that our application is a tkinter instance. So instead of self.root.title, we can simply say self.title because this is the instance of tk. You can see that I also removed that self.root equals root because that's no longer needed. And now, since our application actually will give us an instance of tk, instead of doing this down here, we're no longer going to do anything with these root variables here. All I have to do is say app is equal to application, and then I can say app super.main loop to run that main loop. Oops, and I almost made a mistake here. When we run this super.init, I don't know why I put that there at the top. This needs to be within our init function because we want this constructor initialized whenever we create our application, and all that's going to get done within there. So now I think this is much cleaner and easier to understand and a lot easier to maintain than what we saw before. So if I go ahead and run this, then we can see that we're still just getting our application.
So our small business manager class now is an instance itself of tk.tk class. And when we call and initialize it, we give it a title and we super the values from tk.tk so we can inherit, and basically now we can call our app or our self.title here. So app, we can call app.title if we wanted to override it basically.
Now, one more thing about organization. This is more of a personal.
Hey Marty1661, thanks so much for coming in again. Appreciate you for jumping by. Yeah, I have a roadmap completely in my Discord down below. I provided every book I've read, every course I've done. I still need to go back through and populate the information for the Harvard CS50X course and do a week breakdown and follow along. Of the Harvard CS50P course that I completed as my first ever introduction into programming. And so I still need to go back through and do a week-by-week breakdown of my completion of that course. I do have to go and do like backdate and remember all that stuff. So that's why I haven't done it yet. But I have published through there up through week 9 of Harvard CS50X, I believe. And so we're working, and hopefully we'll be able to finish the final project within the next month or so.
Preference than anything. But when I'm looking at code like this, it logically makes more sense to me when the code that's first being run is at the top of the script. So for example, when we run this script, the first thing that we're doing is creating this application and then running that main loop. But that's currently at the bottom of the script, and we can't put it above our class because we have to define our class before we use it. But there's a super easy workaround to this. All we have to do is create a function at the top of the script and add the code there. Now, this is typically called something like a main function, but you can call it whatever you want. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick and show you what I mean. So here at the top, I'm just going to create a new function called main, and then I'm going to put everything within here. So app.application, app.main loop, and then below here where we were running that code, I'm just going to run that main function. And that's just going to do the exact same thing that we saw before, but now we have the code that creates the application at the top of the script. And while we're doing this, we may as well follow some best practices here and add a conditional that you all may have seen before. It's just this if _name is equal to, and then within quotes here, _main. And if it meets that conditional, then I will run that.
Already got that one, baby. Already got it.
Basically, all this means is that we're not running this main method unless we're running this script directly.
All right, we're
and
still
not
good.
Via an import or something like that. It doesn't have anything to do with tkinter. It's just a common practice that you'll see in Python from time to time. And I do have a separate video explaining this conditional, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description section below if that's something that you're curious about. Okay, so now that we've got this simple application created using a class, now let's take what we had before.
Pretty much, Marty.
And add everything back in.
Had very little exposure so far.
Just by adding them to our application class. So I'm going to copy a lot of what we had before, but use our class instance instead. So let me grab a few things here. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of a couple of things that we no longer need. So where we were using creating that instance, we no longer need. So let me go ahead and grab this section here where we're setting up our root and configuring some of that stuff. So I will paste this in here, get that correct. So this is where we were configuring the columns and the rows. Instead of root here, this is just going to be self. And I believe that's all of the customization that we had with our root application. Now let's look at our frames. So remember, we were creating two frames here that were basically identical and were repeating code, which should be a hint that we could probably do this in a better way. If we look at what we're doing here, we're creating a frame and we're adding that to our root application. Sorry, this is a little dark because it's commented out. And this frame has an entry field that's added to the frame. It has a button. It has a text list. And also our add to list function is the handler for some of the events on those widgets. So if we think about this, our frame basically has variables and functions of its own, which is a good sign that it could be a candidate for a class itself, allowing us to add those as properties and methods of that class instead. So let's see what this looks like now. So I'm going to create a new class under our application class, and we'll just call this input form, since that's basically what we're using those frames for. So underneath here, I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this input form. And instead of inheriting from TK here, instead I'm going to inherit from the themed TK.
Class is going to be, the class is going to be then, what's it going to be? What should we name it? Let's name it, menu tabs, right? How about that?
Because or the theme tkinter frame, I mean, since that's what we
or notebook menu tab
frames. So I will inherit from a frame here. And now let's go ahead and create
inherit from a frame.
Our init function. I'll just copy that and paste it here. Now remember, when we create a frame, it actually takes in an argument. It needs to know the parent container that this frame will be added to. So for the arguments that we're going to get in this initialization here, we can add the argument of parent. It needs to know that parent container. And that's going to need to be passed into that frame's constructor so that it knows to add our frame to this application. So just like we did before, where we ran the constructor of this TK instance here, we're instead going to run the constructor here of this super, which is going to be a frame. And the argument that it's going to take is it's going to take in this parent argument so that it knows to pass that in whenever it creates the frame. So just like that, we now have a class for an empty frame. So now let's add those properties and our method to this frame class to customize this a bit. So first, let's copy the widgets that we added to our first frame. So down here, let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and grab everything that we did to this frame after we created it, except for the grid layout there. I'll save that for later. So I'm going to grab where we configured the columns and rows all the way down here until we get to our second frame of creating this text list. So I'm going to cut all of that out, and I'm going to put this here within our init function. Let me get the indentations and everything correctly and uncomment this. And now I need to make a few changes here. So you can see that it's given me some underlines for some warnings or some errors in this case. So I need to change frame to be self. So we have self.columnConfigure, self.rowConfigure. When we create entry, we need to pass in self, which is this frame, as that entry's parent container. We haven't added our add to list function yet, so I'm not going to worry about that. And lastly, let's go ahead and change that last frame there as the parent for this button and this list box. Now I want these to be available within this frame itself. So here at the beginning, I'm going to put self dot in front of all of these here. And let me save that. Now, just to clarify, the reason I added self here before all of these is because I want to have access to these variables within the entirety of our frame here. Oh, and you guys probably noticed this way earlier than I did, but this isn't even in my frame. I don't know what I'm doing here. let me put this where it's supposed to be in the frame. Sorry about that. That would have been a big mistake. Okay, so again, to clarify, the reason I added self.entry and self.entry button and things like that.
Okay, so I'm kind of starting to do a little bit of stuff on my own just based off what he's talking about. So if I have menu tab, takes in a TTK frame, I initialize it, self parent title. I super all the information from the parent, but then I save self dot title. Self dot title equals to title given. So then I can say if I call inventory tab is equal to menu tab inventory and I run. No, okay, so that's not happening. So then I need to go parent dot add. Um, like that. I need to add the child of self. Okay, so now I am getting a tab, but no title associated with that one. So what about I go parent dot title? No. How do I pass in the title as an argument?
Is because if we hadn't done that and we had just put entry, then what that does is it just creates a local variable within our init function, and it wouldn't be accessible within other methods and things like that within our class. So we want this to be accessible, so it's self.entry instead of just entry there. Basically, anything that you want to be able to access outside of just your init function will need to be prefixed with that. Okay, so now let's add our add to list function to this frame class as well. Now, if this was a function that was acting on your entire application, then you could add it to that application class, but this functionality is using add to list to reference that specific instance of this class and not just something on the add a second class here, then I could do that as well. And all I would need to do here is say, you know, frame2 is equal to input form. There, that works. If I use the button, then that works as well. So our first frame is working, our second frame is working, and
oh no, it's text. No. So this is getting the tab on there. Right? Okay, cool. Now how can I... Okay, let's go here. I am trying to learn tkinter for the first time. Let's go ahead and walk through some examples and build up my current project. I don't want you to show me long lines or blocks of code. Simple one-liners are okay for examples, but don't do my work for me. Wouldn't it be like above, like self.title equals title? Well, that's the title of the, right? So, okay, so let's go title. What if I just make this test? Yes, you're not getting anything there. So it's not accessible via title. Okay. This is what I have so far. Nice. You're got a window and a tab. So if you want to add a label inside the menu tab, try to create something like this. Label equals TK label self. But title is a function. So let me go here. Let's focus on my menu tab function or class. How can I pass in a arg to be the text equals of this frame? Parent.add text equals text. Okay, so then text here equals text. Text equals text. And then you pass in text on the initialization. So now if I do this and go here for quote inventory, there we go. Okay. So you did pass it in as a parameter of text, but you had it included in the add. Okay. So they have it as parent.add, and then you'll see this inventory will pass with. So then I can duplicate this basically and recreate my structure from before. Now way easier. This is the expenses tab, right? And this will say expenses. This is the transactions tab. Transactions. This is the this is going to be the income statement tab. And then this is going to be the balance sheet. Balance sheet tab, quote, balance sheet, balance sheet, and then we're going to create one more tab for the settings. Now if we run that, boom, now we're back to square one here. Here we go. How did I add the title to that tab before? What I did was I went like this, right? So you go like tab is equal to frame or TK ttk dot frame, and then I put in the guy up here, right? Notebook, so tab control, and then I passed in text here equals to quote inventory, like that. So if I'll make this test, right? And then if I go tab control dot add the tab here, that'll show it, I think. Oh. Unknown option text. Maybe I didn't. How do you do it before? Oh. Frame. You create a frame? Let me go back to the previous example.
Root in the second column.
Yeah. So you go frame
to our list instead of needing to manually click that button.
Well, the frame's not going to have any text. Let's go back to my notes here. Notebook. Frame. Oh yeah, you do it on the ad. John, so I include it on the ad for this specific frame. So frames don't typically get a label, but you can add a text to the frame when adding it to a notebook, creating this tabbed effects here. So if I add tab text equals tab, and I run that. Oh. There you go. We could have guessed it. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so cool. So now I have the abilities, the understanding basically to create classes and super the parent and then we can just throw stuff in here basically a lot easier.
We got the house!
No, get out of here. Terrible ad.
It's both laid out here in our application, so that seems to be good. Okay, so that works, but I have a feeling that some of you are going to look at this with these classes here, and you're going to be thinking, okay, now that was a lot to do in order to get our simple application working. Is it really worth it? You know, couldn't we have just used one of those workarounds? And I get that. It seems like if you just want a super simple application, that classes might be overkill and you just want to keep everything in the global namespace. But remember, we were changing what we had already written in the last video. If we'd written this from scratch, it really wouldn't have taken that long to just do it this way from the beginning. But also, even with simple applications, there's almost always something that comes up that we're going to want to add later that we'd overlooked when actually planning even a simple application. So doing it this way from the beginning just makes it so much easier than doing it the way that we saw in the last video. So for example, let's say that we have our two frames, our two forms here, our two input forms. But when we were planning this application, we overlooked that we also wanted to have a way to clear those list boxes of everything that's been added. So the way that we did it before, we would need to add a new button widget to both of those first and second frames separately. We would have to make sure that the event handlers reference the correct list boxes for each one of those frames. And that leads us right back to the situation that we had before and just leaves a lot of room for mistakes. But the way that we've done this here, it just makes it super easy. So if I wanted to put a clear button here, all I would have to do is go down to our frame class, and let's just add this second button right underneath our add button. So I will copy that, and I'll paste that here, and we'll just call this entry button 2. And also we want the text for this to be clear, so I'll say clear there. For the command, let's call this clear list, and that is a method that we'll write here in just a second. And we also want this to be in the third column, so column 2 there, and that looks good for adding another button. And since we now have 3 things in our first row for this text list, let's also column expand this to 3 instead of 2. And now all we have to do is create this clear list event handler here. So let me just copy this method declaration here, and I will call this clear list instead of add to list. And I don't have a keyboard binding on here, so I don't need to accept that event. And now all I'm going to do is delete everything in this text list here. So I can just say self.textlist.delete, and it's going to be very similar to what we did to our entry here. After we add it to the list and we remove everything from that entry, we're also going to do this with the text list and just delete everything from the beginning, which is this 0, all the way to the end, which is this constant within the TK class. So all we did was change our input form here. We made no changes at all to our application class or anything like that. So now if I save this and run it, then we can see that both of these now have a clear button. So if I add things back in again, everything's still working. And if I hit clear, then it only clears that left frame. If I hit clear here, then it only clears that right list box. So now I can close that down. So it just makes it a lot easier whenever we are wanting to add something to our application to know exactly where to add it. So there I wanted to change something in the input form by adding a button. So I just went in and all I had to do is change that input form and change no more of the application. I didn't have to touch anything outside of these classes here. And now that we have everything written down here, let's actually walk through this code just really fast and just kind of take a look at how it kind of logically flows a little bit better now too. So when we first run these scripts, it's going to run this main function here. If we go up, we can see we're creating our application and running that main loop. So then we can just look here that we have our application. We can see that we're setting the title. Everything with our main application is here. So everything from our main window configurations to what's added to that main window. We can see that we're adding to input forms here, so we can go see what's in there. And we can see that this has its own customizations and buttons and event handlers and things like that as well. So I think the layout is just much better. Now, a little side note here. Let me, you can see that this has been underlined the whole time here. This is just a Pylint warning for our event handler, and that's because Pylint gives warnings when you have an unused argument. So we need to accept this event object that tkinter is sending to this function, but we're not doing anything with it in this example. And if you declare a variable that's not being used, the common convention is to put an underscore in front of that variable. So instead, if I just called this underscore event instead, then that will likely get rid of that pylint warning and let it know that we know that we're not using that argument and that it's by design. That's just a side note. That pylint warning was bugging me, but it doesn't actually have any effect on our application. Okay, so we're just about wrapped up with the video, but I did want to mention another positive to breaking up our code into classes like we did in this video. Now, this might not be something that we think about until the application grows in size, but once we have a lot of different frames or pages for our GUI application, then these classes allow us to easily break these into separate files. So for example, if our input form that we created here is something that we use in multiple windows, we could actually split that out into a utilities.py file or something like that. And then within our main application, we could just say from utilities import input form. And that would clean up a lot of our code in our main files if we used imports instead. And these classes allow us to do that easily. But with that said, I think that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you feel like you got a good understanding of why you want to use classes when working.
Yeah, that's definitely seems that was very, very informative with classes. So interesting. So I wonder how I could abstract out this menu tab then to a different file called like GUI utilities, GUI utilities, GUI util classes or something, right? So this is what we got so far today. Is we have 6 menu options up top: inventory, expenses, transactions, income statement, balance sheet, and settings. And so we will be diving into these over the next coming days, little by little here. So I'm really excited. This is day 1 of tkinter use, so it will be rough. It will be hard and challenging pause like as at these early stages, but the more and more exposure we get to this, the more and more time, the easier it'll be, the more fluent we become in actual tkinter, the package itself or library, and we can really start to flow and create these menus. And then really, I think it's a great skill to be able to create these menus on the fly and quite rapidly for whatever application you might be using, because it's really handy, honestly. So I'm going to keep doing my research here, you guys, but this marks the 10 o'clock mark. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow around 7 p.m. PST where we'll continue on with our learning. Tomorrow we're going to be diving back into some of our readings in Fluent Python and DSA in Python before we begin back into tkinter and our small business manager project. Right now I have a class where I have an item class that I created last time, and then I have now we're building out a GUI here. So lots of stuff going on. I'll see you guys back here tomorrow, 7 p.m. PST. Please join the Discord link down below where you can get access to all of my resources from a roadmap of my learning and teaching myself computer science and programming in Python thus far. Thank you guys so much for joining me. This has been a great stream on March 17th, Monday, 2025. See you guys tomorrow. Bye, guys.